started.
Gravitas, co-presented by Skoda Superb, best in next class. Co-powered by Star Health Insurance, the health insurance specialist.
First, the Wuhan virus, now the vaccines. These words have dominated global and living room discussions this entire year. Virus and vaccines, the two words that 2020 has been centered around. The world is now inching closer to those shots. The vaccine race is nearing the final lap. Last night, we told you how the UK and Russia are gearing up for vaccination drives. India, too, is making its own preparations. The Indian Prime Minister has said that a vaccine could be ready within weeks. On Gravitas tonight, we tell you all about India's preparations for the vaccine rollout. How soon will Indians get the shot, the priorities, the challenges that lie ahead. We also tell you why getting people to take the vaccine across the world is also a hurdle. I am Molly Gampede, also on the show tonight. After lashing out at Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's remarks, India has warned Canada. New Delhi issues a démarche, summons the Canadian High Commissioner. We get you the latest. Years after camping in Cox's Bazar, Rohingya refugees are now gearing up for relocation to the Bhashan Char Island. We get you a ground report from Bangladesh. Is China breeding genetically modified soldiers? The U.S. intelligence chief says the Chinese regime could be creating mutant soldiers. We tell you more. NASA wants to buy moon dust. Deals have been struck with 4 companies for lunar sample collection. Adolf Hitler just won an election in Namibia. The politician is dominating headlines for his name, but says he is not aiming for world domination. But first, as always, Gravitas Global Headlines.
The World Health Organization has said it was considering introducing electronic vaccination certificates as hopes for an end to the pandemic were boosted after Britain became the first country to approve the use of a COVID-19 vaccine. WHO's Europe experts said that introducing such a certificate would make it possible to identify and monitor people who have been vaccinated, even though it has not been finalized and would have to be drawn up in accordance with national laws. The certificate would not be an immunity passport, which is supposed to assure that its carrier is protected against the disease because they have been infected and recovered. Pakistan has faced another bout of embarrassment at the United Nations when over 100 countries declined to support one of its resolutions. Over half of the members did not vote for the resolution called Promotion of Interreligious and Intercultural Dialogue. Pakistan said that the resolution is a part of a diplomatic campaign to raise awareness about Islamophobia, anti-Muslim hatred, and defamation of religious personalities and symbols. The resolution comes from a country which has a poor track record of safeguarding its own minority communities. 51 members did not vote in favor, while 52 members remained abstentious. The world body remained divided over the resolution that has been co-sponsored by Pakistan and the Philippines. In a string of prosecutions brought against high-profile Beijing critics and democracy campaigners, Hong Kong's pro-democracy media tycoon Jimmy Lai has been denied bail on fraud charge. The media tycoon remained into custody on Thursday after being charged with fraud. The case has been adjourned until April. Lai's detention came as a prominent opposition politician announced that he had fled overseas during a trip to Denmark. The 73-year-old is the owner of Hong Kong's best-selling Apple Daily, which is a popular tabloid that is pro-democracy and fiercely critical of authorities. A senior Chinese diplomat in Australia has said that Prime Minister Scott Morrison overreacted to a social media post about alleged war crimes by Australian soldiers in Afghanistan, adding that his actions drew more attention to the report. Earlier this week, Morrison said that a Chinese official's tweet showing a fake image of an Australian soldier appearing to slit a child's throat was truly repugnant and merited an apology. China has not apologized. According to reports, U.S. prosecutors are discussing a deal with lawyers for Huawei finance chief Meng Wanzhou to resolve criminal charges against her, signaling a potential end to a case that has strained ties between the United States, China, and Canada. Negotiations between Meng's attorneys and the U.S. Justice Department picked up after the U.S. presidential election a month ago, but it is still unclear what kind of deal could be struck. Meng was arrested in Canada in December 2018 on a U.S. warrant. She faces bank fraud charges for allegedly misleading HSBC Holdings plc about Huawei Technologies Co. Ltd's business dealings in Iran, which was subject to U.S. sanctions. The health of Australia's Great Barrier Reef, the world's most extensive and spectacular coral reef system, is in a critical state and has lost more than half of its coral. Coral bleaching in 2016, 2017 and 2020 has further damaged its health and affected its animal, bird and marine population, according to the International Union for Conservation of Nature. Such bleaching occurs when hotter water destroys the algae which the coral feeds on, causing it to turn white. The Union has moved the reef's status to critical and deteriorating on its watch list. There was an explosion at South Africa's second-largest crude oil refinery in Durban on Friday morning. It was not yet clear whether there had been injuries or deaths. A Reuters photographer saw several fire engines spraying foam onto the affected part of the refinery, which is operated by African energy company Engen. Ambulances, Metropolitan Police and National Police were on the scene. A California wildfire spanning across 4,000 acres of land has been wreaking havoc since 2 days and forced mass evacuations as powerful winds pushed flames through southern parts of the state. The blaze began late on Wednesday as a house fire and quickly spread to a full-blown forest fire. Houses and nearby vegetation were set ablaze on Thursday. In order to avoid further damage, the Southern California Utilities has cut off power to tens of thousands of residents. India have beaten Australia by 11 runs in the first T20I of the three-match series in Canberra. The visitors were in trouble at 114 for 6 after being put into bat, but were propelled to 161 by Ravindra Jadeja's 23-ball 44. But Jadeja suffered a concussion after being hit on the helmet in the final over and was replaced by Yuzvendra Chahal. The leg spinner then picked up 3 wickets alongside debutant T. Natarajan to restrict the Aussies to 150 for 7. The organizers of the Tokyo Olympics have revealed that the postponement of the Games will cost an additional $2.8 billion. Around $1.8 billion of that figure will be provided by the organizing committee and the Tokyo Metropolitan Government, while $700 million will come from the central government. A $250 million contingency fund will also be used, while additional money will be raised through sponsorships and insurance.
The United Kingdom has approved a vaccine. The rollout begins on Monday. Russia is already giving shots to its citizens, but selectively. The US wants to start inoculating its citizens before Christmas. What about India? As the world gears up for the vaccines, India has kicked off its own preparations. For the first time today, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi outlined India's vaccine strategy. the priorities for the country, the preparations, and the plan for mass inoculation. The Indian Prime Minister believes India will not have to wait for long. The vaccine could be ready within weeks. So how does India plan to inoculate more than 1 billion citizens? What role will India play in enabling global access to vaccines? And what is the biggest challenge before this vaccine rollout plan? We tell you all that you need to know in the next 15 minutes. Let's first tell you what happened in New Delhi today. Prime Minister Modi participated in an all-party meeting. This came after his visit to 3 vaccine manufacturers last week. The Indian Prime Minister informed different political leaders about India's preparations and said that Indians could get a vaccine within weeks.
एक्सपर्ट्स ये मानकर चल रहे हैं कि अब कोरोना की वैक्सीन के लिए बहुत ज्यादा इंतजार नहीं करना पड़ेगा। माना जा रहा है कि अगले कुछ हफ्तों में कोरोना की वैक्सीन तैयार हो जाएगी। जैसे ही वैज्ञानिकों की हरी झंडी मिलेगी, भारत में टीकाकरण अभियान शुरू कर दिया जाएगा। भारत के वैज्ञानिक अपनी सफलता को लेकर बहुत ही आश्वस्त हैं। उनका कॉन्फिडेंस लेवल बहुत ही मजबूत है जी। अभी अन्य देशों की कई वैक्सीनों के नाम बाजार में हम सब सुन रहे हैं, लेकिन फिर भी दुनिया की नजर कम कीमत वाली सबसे सुरक्षित वैक्सीन पर है और इस वजह से स्वाभाविक है पूरी दुनिया की नजर भारत पर भी है।
Let's break down what the Indian Prime Minister said. There are 8 vaccine candidates that are on India's radar. They are in different stages of trials, and these vaccines can be manufactured in India. There are 3 vaccine candidates that are made in India. This means they are being developed in India. These vaccines are also in different stages of their trials. With the rollout now barely weeks away, India is also laying down a list of priorities. Who will get the vaccine first? The healthcare workers, like several other countries, will be the first to get the shots in India. 10 million healthcare workers are first in line to get the vaccine, followed by 20 million frontline workers. This includes police and armed forces personnel and municipal workers, among others. 270 million senior citizens will be eligible for the jab too. Those with serious health conditions are likely to be prioritized. A national expert group has been created. This includes technical experts as well as officials from the central and the state government. This group will shoulder the responsibility of India's vaccine campaign. The focus is on vaccines that will be cheap and safe. It is what the world needs to defeat the Wuhan virus. A small group of wealthy countries have already grabbed more than half of the potential doses in the world. This includes countries like the US, the UK, Japan and Canada. They have struck deals that ensure large enough supplies to vaccinate their entire populations with doses to spare. In comparison, an alliance of more than 150 countries has only managed to secure 700 million doses. I'm talking about COVAX, the global alliance for equitable vaccine access that includes several poor countries. Clearly, money is playing a big role in determining who gets a shot. So the world will be watching India closely, because if it accomplishes its mission to ensure cheap and safe vaccines for all, several countries could reach out to New Delhi for help. And India is in a position to help. India is one of the leading vaccine suppliers to the world, with Indian vaccine manufacturers sending more than 1 billion shots abroad every year. There are 8 vaccine candidates that could be made in India. Our next report tells you how India's vaccine production prowess could help the entire world.
On Tuesday, India received a special delivery from Moscow.
These containers contain vials of the Sputnik V, the Russian vaccine that's undergoing trials in India. Russia will supply 100 million doses of Sputnik V to India, but it is not the only candidate in the mix. There are more than 100 vaccine candidates under development across the world. Out of this, 8 are the most promising. They are Serum Institute's Covishield, the Moderna vaccine candidate, the Pfizer-BioNTech shot, Russia's Sputnik V, India's Covaxin, the Zycov-D from Zydus Cadila, the shot from Biological E, and Genova Biopharmaceuticals vaccine for the Wuhan virus. That's another made-in-India option. According to data from the Duke University, India has access to a potential 1.6 billion doses. Presuming most vaccines need 2 shots, this supply covers nearly 60% of India's population. So where is India getting these shots from? 1 billion doses are from Novavax, the American biotech company. Novavax has signed an agreement with the Serum Institute of India to produce these shots. The same company that will supply 500 million doses of the Oxford vaccine. The remaining 100 million shots will be of Sputnik V. The makers of this Russian vaccine have tied up with Dr. Reddy's and pharma company Hetero. India has set ambitious targets for its vaccine rollout. By July 2021, India plans to vaccinate 1 out of 5 Indians. That means 200 to 250 million citizens would be in the line to get the shot. The Indian government would need 400 to 500 million vaccine shots to achieve this target. But India is in a good position to meet this target because of its status as the world's leading vaccine maker. Indian vaccine makers supply 40% of the global capacity. India produces 2.3 billion doses of vaccines annually. Out of this, 74% are meant for export.
About 70% of the vaccines used around the world for extended immunization programs are made in India. I mean, almost every child in the world has received a vaccine made in India. And that's really important. It means that Indian companies put out 1 billion vaccines a year. And that's the kind of capacity that we're going to need in order to get this vaccine to the people who need it all over the world, not just people in the United States, not just people in Europe, but for people in India, in Africa, in Asia.
India has a major responsibility on its shoulders. It not only has to provide enough vaccines for its citizens, but Indian vaccine makers also have to pitch in to fill in the global supply gaps. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi says a cheap yet effective vaccine is coming soon. The world's eyes are now on New Delhi's next move. Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
2 vaccines have received regulatory approvals. At least 1 more is awaiting the nod. Several shots are in stage 3 of the clinical trials. Warehouses are being readied, hospitals are being prepared, doctors are on standby. Priority charts are being drawn up for the vaccination drives. In short, everything seems to be in place to heal the world from this Wuhan virus pandemic. Or is it? What if I tell you that the biggest challenge still awaits us, and it's got nothing to do with procurement, distribution or storage of the vaccine? The biggest challenge is getting people to take the vaccine. Sounds unbelievable? Listen to this.
I don't want to be vaccinated. I want to be free. I want to live my life. I want all my friends to live their lives. You know.
Hey. They thought they could easily get their great reset. Little did they know. Little did they know. They thought they could easily have it.
Pandemics are hoax.
Little did they know.
The pandemics are hoax. It's a cover-up. It's a cover-up. It's while they bring in reset the whole economy.
This London resident is one of the many anti-vaxxers who have taken to the streets around the world over the last few months. They marched through Berlin on the 22nd of November. There were anti-lockdown protests in London 6 days later. On the 28th of November, 60 protesters were arrested in London. You must be wondering, why are people protesting against a vaccine that is the closest to a silver bullet that we may have against the Wuhan virus? Honestly, I will not be able to give you a simple answer here. Vaccines have immunized the population against several health conditions in the past, be it polio, flu, measles. But what is also true is that there is skepticism around vaccines, and it stems from a variety of reasons. In the United States, for example, some people view vaccines as an infringement on their rights. Remember, people had protested against face masks as well. Some people are scared of the possible side effects of vaccines, and the fear has only been accelerated by the fast-track approach that's been adopted for the development and approval of the Wuhan virus vaccines. There is fear that a vaccine that's been developed in a record time will be a bad vaccine. And the result of this fear sounds something like this.
Today, I won't. I will wait. Rather, now I won't take the risk to be vaccinated. No.
The problem in France is more peculiar. One expert is of the opinion that people were not familiarized about the idea of a vaccine well in advance.
We didn't talk about the vaccine early enough in France. That is to say, we didn't talk about the vaccine at the beginning of the year. In France, 54% of people say they will be vaccinated against COVID-19. In Germany, 69%. In the UK, 79%. In India, 87%. So the acceptance of vaccination in general is lower in France than abroad, and even lower for COVID.
Lack of information is a problem. Misinformation is another. Earlier this year, a lot of people rejected polio and flu vaccination in the Philippines after some fake news was spread over WhatsApp and Facebook. And this gave the health workers a fair idea that getting people to take the Wuhan virus vaccine will not be easy.
They said it's because of Facebook, that there is a report that people who had been vaccinated in Tarlac had died. They did not have any proof of it. They just had heard about it.
Sa Facebook, dahil may nabalita nun na sa Tarlac.
The skepticism surrounding vaccines also being fueled by certain countries that have a track record of profiteering from crisis and cannot be trusted with developing non-faulty shots. I'm talking about China. It is carrying out trials in Brazil. Now, a poll says only 63% of Brazilians want to take the vaccine. That number was 85% just 4 months ago. Clearly, getting people to take the vaccine will be a crucial challenge. The question is, how do you deal with it? There is no way we can claim to be safe from the Wuhan virus until we are all vaccinated. So what should countries do? What should world leaders do? What should you and I do to get people to take the vaccine? Perhaps instill faith in people? As for leaders, they could lead from the front. Former US presidents Barack Obama, George Bush and Bill Clinton have pledged to get vaccinated on television to promote the safety of the vaccine. The press secretary to the British Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, has said that he later may be persuaded to take the shot on television. A recent YouGov poll found that 20% of Britons were either not confident or not very confident that a vaccine was safe. Countries should work towards acknowledging people's concerns and respectfully correct people's opinion by weeding out misinformation. Some countries are incentivizing immunization. In fact, Japan, France, the US, Norway, and some states in India have announced that people will be given free Wuhan virus vaccines. Here's what you and I can do. Junk fake news. Do not forward WhatsApp rumors and encourage only science and fact-based conversation. The French government has launched a crackdown on radicalism and separatism. It is undertaking a wave of measures to root out extremism, the foremost being the investigation of at least 76 mosques in the country. The French Interior Minister says these mosques could pose a threat to national security and may get shut down if the doubts are confirmed. As the crackdown begins, French Muslims have raised fears that the move could alienate them in the French society. Our next report gets you both sides of the story.
A knife attack outside the Charlie Hebdo headquarters. A beheading of a middle school teacher in a Paris suburb. And the beheading of a churchgoer in Nice. France has suffered heavily due to Islamic terror. The French government has launched an all-out crackdown on radicals. It is undertaking a wave of unprecedented measures to combat religious extremism.
According to our intel services, there are 76 places of worship which are suspected of radicalization and separatism.
France is expected to investigate at least 76 mosques, flagged as possible threats to the country's republican values and security. If the doubts are confirmed, they will be closed down. Investigators are digging into the financing of mosques and the backgrounds of imams suspected of peddling radical theories.
There are, in some concentrated areas, places of worship which are clearly anti-republican, where imams are followed by the intel services and where the discourse runs counter to our values, such as equality between men and women, anti-Semitism, hatred against Catholics, hatred against France, and financing that looks more than suspicious.
In the last 10 months, a total of 8 major terror-related incidents have taken place in France. They range from the ramming of cars, to the stabbing and shooting of policemen, to the beheading of a teacher and a churchgoer. France is home to the biggest population of Muslims in Europe. At least 8% of the French population follows Islam. But in recent years, many French Muslims have often been accused of harboring extremist sympathies. In October, right before middle school teacher Samuel Paty was beheaded for showing a caricature of Prophet Muhammad to his students, the Grand Mosque of Pantin on the outskirts of Paris was provoking Muslim sentiments. The mosque authorities shared a video on their Facebook page peddling hatred against Samuel Paty. The video was taken down shortly after Samuel Paty was beheaded. The French government ordered a 6-month-long closure of the mosque. Now the closures are slowly spreading to other mosques in the country. The government's crackdown has left some Muslims feeling increasingly alienated in their own country.
What I want to highlight is that out of 2,500 mosques and places of worship in France, we are talking of 76, so less than 3%. A very big majority don't have any problems. And if we talk of 18 mosques that could be closed, it is less than 1%. So again, it's often the failing ones. That comprise a minority who make headlines. Unfortunately, silencing the majority who are moving with the times and their religion. We feel that government decisions and plans are off the mark. Islam sells. It's the daily obsession of some politicians, some elected officials, and some media, for whom we are their main business.
Defeating religious extremism needs strong and decisive action. France has suffered due to terror more than any other European nation. its efforts to curb radical Islam must not be mistaken for Islamophobia. Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
Days after Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's remarks on the ongoing farmer protests in India, New Delhi issued a strong démarche to the Canadian High Commissioner Nadir Patel. What warning did India send out to Canada? And what explains Canada's activism over the ongoing farmer protests in India? In the next 4 minutes, we try and better understand what's going on. I'll start with the warning. The Canadian High Commissioner was summoned to the Ministry of External Affairs of India earlier today. Nadir Patel was informed that comments by the Canadian Prime Minister and the members of the Canadian Parliament constitute an unacceptable interference in India's internal affairs. India reiterated that such actions, if continued, would have a seriously damaging impact on ties between the two sides. Allow me to quote now from the Indian Ministry of External Affairs official statement. These comments have encouraged gatherings of extremist activities in front of our High Commission and consulates in Canada that raise issues of safety and security. We expect the Canadian government to ensure the fullest security of Indian diplomatic personnel and its political leaders to refrain from pronouncements that legitimize extremist activism. Now, this is the second warning by India in less than a week. On the 2nd of December, the Indian External Affairs Ministry had urged Canada to not let diplomatic conversations get misrepresented for political purposes. But despite India's requests, Canadian lawmakers have continued to make unwarranted remarks on the farmers' protest, which, by the way, has entered its 9th day as I speak. What explains Canada's activism? What business does Justin Trudeau have in commenting on India's internal affairs? Well, it all seems to be a part of Trudeau's political strategy to appease the Sikh vote bank in Canada. The Sikh community in Canada may comprise 2% of the country's total population, but they have come to wield more power than most of their immigrant counterparts. They have become an influential vote bank. In the 2019 Canadian federal election, as many as 18 Sikhs were voted to the country's parliament. Out of these, 13 belonged to Justin Trudeau's Liberal Party, 4 were from the right-leaning Conservative Party, and 1 from the New Democratic Party. The Sikh community also has a voice at the highest levels of power. Justin Trudeau's own cabinet has 3 Sikh members of parliament. This includes Navdeep Bains, the Minister of Innovation, Science and Industry, Bardesh Shagar, the Minister of Diversity, Inclusion and Youth, and Harjit Sajjan, who has served as the Minister of National Defence since 2015. And by the way, the presence of the Sikh community is not restricted to the current government. The New Democratic Party, which bagged 24 seats in the last election, is led by a Sikh, Jagmeet Singh. Indians may not think much of Jagmeet Singh, but in Canadian politics, he has become a force to reckon with. He is the first Sikh to be elected as leader of a major political party in Canada. It was his party which started a petition on its website calling on Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau to make a statement on the protests in India. That petition is on your screen. It has now achieved its purpose. Trudeau has made his stance clear, and the Indian government has responded in kind. International organizations are slamming Bangladesh for relocating nearly 1,600 Rohingya refugees from Cox's Bazar to the island of Bhashan Char. Are they right in doing so? In 2017, after the Rohingya crackdown, Bangladesh welcomed the families that had fled the genocide in Myanmar. 3 years on, when Bangladesh is trying to relocate them to a planned shelter, should foreign agencies be complaining? WION reports from the island of Bhashan Char in Bangladesh. We are in the Bangladeshi island of Bhashan Char in the Bay of Bengal. In Bangla, Bhashan Char means a floating island. At least 1,600 Rohingya refugees have sailed here from Chittagong after a 160-kilometer bus ride from Cox's Bazar, where they have been camping for years. WION has been covering their journey.
I'm now at Chittagong Boat Club. These people are now on their way to a new destination. Rohingyas stay here for some days.
The government of Bangladesh has spent $112 million to develop infrastructure in Bhashan Char. It hopes that the island will eventually host 100,000 refugees. Shelters, dams, education and healthcare facilities have been set up for them. But the efforts are not exactly being celebrated. Some international organizations say Rohingyas are being moved to Bhashan Char without their consent. They are also pointing at the island's distance from the mainland. The government of Bangladesh maintains that despite being 21 miles from the mainland, Bhashan Char has sufficient facilities and livelihood options, adding that the relocation is aimed at avoiding overcrowding in Cox's Bazar. What about the Rohingyas? Were they happy in leaving their Cox's Bazar shelters?
We are not happy at the camps. If we go back to Myanmar, we may have our people, but we don't have anything there to prove our citizenship. So we didn't agree to go back. We heard from seniors as well as the television that we'll get much more facilities at Bhashan Char.
Cox's Bazar happens to be among Bangladesh's most vulnerable areas. The camps there have become unhygienic and unsafe. There is no planning, just abundant crime. The situation has been worsened by contamination and mismanagement of water. The Bhashan Char, on the other hand, is well sanitized, well protected and has abundant space. 700,000 Rohingyas fled Myanmar in 2017 following a military-led genocide. Bangladesh has been hosting the refugees since. In 2019, Bangladesh's foreign minister said that his government spends $3.6 billion annually in providing for the Rohingyas. Dhaka is now looking at improving the living conditions and also making their lives more sustainable.
These people are now on their way to a new destination. They are going to begin a new life on a new Iceland. It is being said that they are going there voluntarily. In the meantime, all arrangements have been made for them in Bhashan Char to meet their basic needs, including food and medicine.
Should people on the outside be complaining when those shifting homes are not all that skeptical?
The Bangladesh government has given us assurance of a better life there. They will give us a good environment, food and shelter, which is why we are going there. In the Kutupalong camps, there are 8 to 10 lakh people living in bad and crowded conditions. We are going there to get rid of that situation.
There is a sense of a new beginning on the ground at Bhashan Char. WION has learnt that the government of Bangladesh will eventually let international organizations visit the island.
Some national level NGOs are currently working in Bhashan Char for Rohingyas. The government has planned to bring the representatives of some international organizations after Rohingyas stay here for some days. And it is being said that if these Rohingyas give a positive feedback, then Bangladesh government will bring another 1 lakh Rohingyas here for new life.
Starting afresh is never easy, especially for a community that has seen so much and lost so much. But it is never too late. In Bhashan Char, Bangladesh, Lakmina Jasmine Soma for WION World is One. If you thought mutant soldiers with unstoppable physical and mental powers were nothing more than science fiction, then brace yourselves for what I am about to tell you. In a chilling op-ed, the US Intel chief has warned that China could be breeding genetically modified soldiers. You heard that right. The Chinese regime could be creating mutant soldiers. This possibility has been raised by John Ratcliffe, a former Republican congressman and the director of national intelligence under the Trump administration. Ratcliffe has released an exhaustive report labeling China as the biggest threat to democracy and freedom since the Second World War. He says Beijing is bent on global domination and is giving increasing importance to biotechnology in its military strategy in order to achieve its ambitions. He has warned that Chinese authorities have been conducting human tests on members of the People's Liberation Army in the hopes of developing soldiers with biologically enhanced capabilities. Capabilities like lifting huge weights, infrared night vision, and running at high speeds over extreme distances. Ratcliffe says there seems to be no ethical limit to China's pursuit of power. Time and again, several US-based think tanks have issued similar warnings about soldiers having no physical, physiological, or cognitive limitations. Not too sure about genetic mutations, but the Chinese regime has indeed been working on scientific advancements to boost the capabilities of the PLA troops. In November last year, China's mouthpiece, the Global Times, carried this report about how China was looking to build Iron Man suits that would let soldiers fly. And then 3 weeks back, the Global Times carried another report on how Chinese scientists were developing exoskeletons to be used in high-altitude regions. It said the exoskeleton can effectively save 5 to 10% of the energy spent in walking, climbing, and carrying goods. Ratcliffe's claims may be a little far-fetched, but given that it's China we are talking about, the possibility of mutant soldiers becoming a reality cannot be downplayed. Meanwhile, the Chinese regime has taken note of these claims. The Chinese Foreign Ministry has issued a statement denouncing all such reports and accusing the US government of being engaged in a Cold War mindset. I'll leave you with their response.
In recent years, the US has heavily pushed unilateralism, broken its promises and withdrawn from alliances, damaging multilateralism and global cooperation. Who is the upholder of global peace and who damages the global order? The global community can see at a glance. We hope some US politicians will respect facts, stop its fabrications, stop concocting and spreading the political virus and political lies, stop damaging US-China relations and US-China mutual trust and cooperation. Otherwise, it will further damage the US's reputation and national image.
NASA has signed deals with 4 private companies for collection of lunar dust over the next 3 years. These deals have been struck for as low as $1. What does this mean, and why does NASA want to buy moon dust? Our next report finds out.
Aiming for the moon is easier today than ever before. Collecting samples from the moon isn't all that big a deal either.
Sample collection had made contact with
NASA just awarded contracts for lunar sample collection at rock-bottom prices. Deals were struck with 4 companies for $1 to $15,000. Four private space companies from Colorado, Japan, Luxembourg, and California will now be able to collect a small amount of lunar soil known as regolith.
And liftoff.
This will be during their scheduled unmanned missions between 2022 and 2023. The ownership of the lunar soil will then be transferred to NASA. The NASA deal comes days after China's boldest lunar mission touched down on the lunar surface. Chang'e 5 aims to bring back material from the moon's surface for the first time in more than 40 years.
Next, we will continue our lunar exploration. Its purpose is to provide better technical support for future scientific and exploration activities. Our future lunar exploration activities will be more open to cooperation with other countries.
Any lesson learned about the moon is crucial for Mars exploration missions. And the red planet is what all countries are now aiming at. NASA's deal with private companies also gives a further push to private space missions that have already got a boost from SpaceX's recent blastoff from Florida.
40 seconds into flight, Dragon and Falcon 9 traveling 709 meters per second.
Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
A local election in Namibia has caught the attention of the world. Why? A man named Adolf Hitler has won a sweeping majority. But the world does not have any reason to fear him. Unlike his namesake, Adolf Hitler from Namibia has no plans for world domination.
This man probably has the worst name that one could ask for. But Adolf Hitler Unona is not a Nazi, neither is he German, or in any way related to the real Hitler, the notorious dictator who ruled over Germany till 1945. So, who is Adolf Hitler Unona? He is a newly elected councillor in Namibia. Unona won the election with 85% of the vote, and won space in leading international publications across the world. It's a little too late for Adolf Hitler Unona to change his name. He's 54, and he does have a sense of humor about his situation. Speaking to a German newspaper, he said, "It doesn't mean that I'm striving for world domination. My father named me after this man. He probably doesn't understand what Adolf Hitler stood for." Adolf Hitler Unona is not the only politician to face a predicament like this. Meet Yutaka Umeda, the mayor of Yamato in Japan, that is home to around 15,000 people. When Democratic nominee Joe Biden won the election in America, Yutaka Umeda became Japan's Joe Biden because of his name. When written in Japanese kanji script, Yutaka Umeda becomes Joe Biden. The internet was quick to point this out. Worldwide fame followed. Here is how Japan's Joe Biden is dealing with the boost in popularity.
I'm really surprised. I was told that I was in the news in Japan, but I was in Tokyo, and I heard from people that I made the news in the United States too. I'm just really surprised. There were many suggestions. Some said I should go to Washington and meet him or invite Joe Biden here. I hope I can call him, although I'm not sure if I can reach him or send a letter. I want to at least write a letter to him.
What's in a name? A lot, if you ask these politicians. Unusual coincidences have brought them worldwide fame, and they are not complaining. Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
With that, it's a wrap on this edition of Gravitas, leaving you as always with Gravitas Images. Thanks for watching.
起仅耗时1秒钟，这个过程是由一套专门设计的国旗展示系统来完成的。相比
进行拍照，既能拍到我们月面国旗，也能拍到我们探测器，拍到月球的表面。